So welcome back to another episode, and this is a very special episode for a few reasons. First of all, my friend Andrew is here, and he has helped do this entire series review, and it's been extremely difficult because we finished all of these games, all the main games in the Valis series.
It was an absolute bear. I don't think we had any idea what we were getting into. They just kept coming and coming, and some of these games are just brutal.
They are very, very brutal. But here's the thing, this is the second thing I want to say, is that for 9 years of doing this show, this was one of my top lists of for a series review that I wanted to do, the Valis series. And the reason why is it's not the best series ever created, but it's got a heck of a legacy in Japan. There's a lot of games we did get, a lot of games we didn't get. And I just wanted to highlight this today and talk about it with Andrew and get through the confusion of the series, of name changes, of different versions of the game. And obviously we cannot tell you every single Valis port that was ever made for every single game. We'd be here for hours, but we will highlight a lot of the versions and a lot of the crazy naming structures.
And if we tried to play all those, we'd be dead, so there'd be no video.
We nearly died doing this, truly. This was a lot of work, but we had a little bit of fun reminiscing and going back through Valis. And the first Valis game we ever played was Valis 3. And you, yourself and our other friend, what was the other guy's name?
David.
Oh, David Penfold, the strongest woman in the world because he always used Chun-Li.
He always used Chun-Li.
Yeah, and we always used to get into arguments with him. I did, over the TurboGrafx versus the Sega CD. But he had Valis 3.
He did, on the Genesis.
On the Genesis. And he came over and brought it over one day. And I just thought it was awesome at the time.
It was probably the first game I ever remember seeing in sort of the Sailor Suit anime style.
Yeah, like Sailor Moon-esque characters and magic, and there's an action platformer, and that's what needs to be said about the entire Valis series, is it's an action platformer. And I guess we need to go back to the very beginning, and Valis first came out on the MSX in 1986, and that's the old Japanese computer, and that was created by Microsoft, wasn't it? That's something I never knew until you were over. You're like, yeah, the MS is Microsoft. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. So really, Japan really embraced the MSX, and it got the very first Valis game, and it's not a really great game.
That's a nice way of saying that it's not a really great game.
And it's unfortunate we have to start off with the weakest game in the series, and that is the first game. But then they did I wouldn't even say a port, but a re-look at this game.
It's a completely different way of doing it. It's still called Valis 1.
Valis 1, and that was brought to the Famicom in Japan. And I have the Famicom version, which is pretty cool here. And it's an action RPG, and it's very, very confusing.
It is. So let's start with why we're even in the Valis universe. I mean, you're playing as a schoolgirl named Yuko Aso. You've been given the Sword of Valis and become the Valis soldier, and you're trying to defend the dream world of Vikanti against an evildoer. Hey, sound familiar?
Yeah.
In this particular case, the bad guy's name is Rogless. He's a big, evil-looking bad guy, and you've got to stop him.
So the goddess Queen Valia gives Yuko the Valis sword and wants her to be the Valis soldier. So what is the gameplay of the Famicom version?
So the Famicom really is a bit of a mess. It's sort of left and right side-scrolling with infinitely respawning enemies, and in various places you can also go up and down.
Which take you to the next level.
Right. It's sort of trying to simulate kind of a three-dimensional world sort of thing, long before we could render a three-dimensional world. But the problem is that none of it is signposted, and sometimes when you try to backtrack, you actually end up in a different place. So it isn't even linearly consistent.
It's very confusing.
It's incredibly confusing.
And you get map pieces later on, but you look at the map and it's like, what is this? It's like this crazy diagram you cannot decipher. We were trying to decipher and we're like, I don't get it.
So after you start the game in sort of a modern Tokyo kind of situation, and you're going between buildings and there's streets and postal signs and things like that. And once you progress past that stage, you sort of fight what I guess I would call bosses, but there's not a different screen, there isn't special music, it's just a slightly larger sprite that you wail on for a while. And sometimes a long while.
And you beat it, and then all of a sudden you're like, was that a boss? Where do I move on to next?
And then you're running around the city some more, and you fight a couple more of those guys, and then you end up in this gold-colored citadel-looking thing.
Where you can talk to different people in different buildings and get different items.
Right, now you've got sort of open doors here and there on different screens, and you can go inside, and there's a little character portrait, and they say something incredibly enlightening, I'm assuming, in Japanese, and then give you stuff, and you go outside, and you keep moving.
And there is an English translated ROM of it, but we were playing through the Japanese version because we're crazy like that.
Yeah, so other than you can open the pause screen and see items and things like that are spelled in English, we had no idea what was going on with what any of these people were telling us.
But even before that, we figured out that this game wasn't very good. We were not having fun. And we can play a lot of Japanese Famicom games and enjoy them immensely, but not with this game.
So this is where things get a little bit confusing, because there was also a Valis 1 version for the Genesis/Megadrive and then the PC Engine CD-ROM, but they actually came out later than Valis 2 and Valis 3.
Yeah, they looked back at the original Famicom version and said, wait, this version looks really, really bad. We need to upgrade it and cash in a little bit and retell the story, redo the graphics. And so we played the Genesis version, and so there's a big improvement in gameplay and cinematics. I like the game, but it is a bit muddy in the control department.
Yeah, clearly the later releases of Valis 1 were following the formula of Valis 2 and 3 much more closely. It wasn't an adventure game anymore. There wasn't a sub-menu with items or anything. It was a strict action platformer.
So Valis 2 was released in 1989 on the PC Engine and on the TurboGrafx. And this was a big deal for the TurboGrafx, the cinematics, the voice acting. And the voice acting is terrible, terribly good.
Why are you fighting for Magus, and what kind of person is he?
That is none of your concern. Give up your sword and return to reality. It's Magus.
Magus.
Gillen, you are the last general of the Rogueless army.
You mean the Rogueless army has been destroyed, and I am the last warrior?
I am giving you a chance to make your own choice. Fight or join my army.
Yeah, it's great. There's some really painful one-liners like you'd expect from any late 80s Turbo CD game. So in Valis 2, it picks up right after where Valis 1 left off. Yuko is back on Earth, back in Tokyo, and once again, the dream world of Akanti is in trouble. This time, the big bad is Magus, the older brother of Rogueless from Valis 1. He's causing trouble, and once again, Yuko must go and save the day. Now, cool part of Valis 2 is that it really established the formula for the whole rest of the series, including the remakes of Valis 1 that we just talked about. The side-scrolling action platformer, basically exclusively from the left moving to the right, slashing enemies that are on the ground or in the air, various power levels for your sword, various magic items that you can use. And that is how the series carried on all the way up until the end.
But man, is this game ever dull. I mean, it was so boring. I was sitting there and Andrew was watching me play it, and I was like, oh my god, it's so boring, this game. The level design, the action platforming, it just wasn't a fun game. But we played all the way through it right to the end boss.
It's a bizarre mix of boring and frustrating, because the level of cheapness in that game is amazing. It's knocking off ledges. It's not Ninja Gaiden bad, but it's cheap.
There's just so many enemies coming at you. You're losing your mind. And the music does not even make up for it. It's just kind of really like kind of synthesized music. It's not even that much fun.
Right. We expect better orchestrations when we're getting CD sound, but they're not to be found in Valis 2, unfortunately.
So yeah, not such a great game. So in 1992, they did a very unusual thing with the Valis series. They brought out Valis SD, Super Deformed Valis. And that was a retelling of the Valis 2 storyline with super deformed characters, meaning the original characters kind of shrunk down into chibi form in a very cartoony look, and it's kind of a fun game. And then we got Sid of Valis, which is a translation, a bad like kind of look at SD Valis, and said, okay, we'll just call it Sid Valis.
Because nobody in the Western market would have understood what SD meant, so they called it Sid instead of SD, and then to make it official, they changed the name of Yuko to Sid. So in that game, you're actually playing as Sid, whoever Sid is.
Which is so strange. And it's not a bad game. The controls are very kind of sloppy. The cinematics are told through, like cutscenes within the game itself. The problem is when you're running, you're always too close to the right side of the screen.
Yeah.
You never know what's coming at you. And it's not a really fun game in that regard, and kind of forgettable for sure. In 1990, we got Valis 3, and we got it on the PC Engine, we got it on the TurboGrafx, we got it on the Genesis, and we got it on the Megadrive.
Now, in Valis 3, again, Dreamworld is in trouble. This time...
It's always in trouble.
Yeah, I don't know why. Yuko has been doing a terrible job. They should have fired her. But now we've got another bad guy named Ramses, and this time he's the leader of the Spirit World, something that hasn't come up in the Valis history before. He's convinced his followers that the spirit world is going to die, and the only place that they can live is in Earth and in the dream world. So he's set about to invade both dimensions. Of course, Yuko has to pick up her trusty sword and save the day again.
The really cool thing about Valis 3 was that not only do you use the main character, but you also get to use 2 brand new selectable characters that you can change on the fly. You have Cham with the whip,
and Yuko's sister Valna. And you don't start with the ability to switch characters. You actually unlock them as you progress through the story in the game.
I really liked using some of their weapons to destroy certain blocks that you cannot use with other characters. Some jumping that you can do with some characters you can't do with the other. I really like the inclusion of that almost, and I'm really saying almost, kind of like a Metroidvania style idea that they never fully went with. And I think in the Valis series, if they had gone that direction, it could have been very cool.
It could have been cool.
Always strict action platforming.
Right. You were never allowed to backtrack. So while the characters did have slightly different abilities and different magic spells, as John is saying, you could never go back. So it was always still slowly marching left to right.
But the one thing I will say is the graphics were awesome, and I gotta say, this is my favorite music in the series. Yes, I discovered it on the Genesis, and the Genesis music is great, but years later, I started playing it on the PC Engine, and I love the score of the PC Engine game. It's incredible. And another thing to mention in Valis, in the beginning of Valis 3, is for the TurboGrafx version, on the side, it says NEC, but in the Genesis version, it says Reno for renovation, because renovation brought the port out.
Valis 3 was sort of the end of the Yuko story. When all was said and done, and Yuko had completed her task, she rose into the heavens to become one with the gods, and we would not see her again in playable form.
So Valis 4 returns to the PC Engine in 1991, and a year later on the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo. And there's a few differences between these versions. The Super Nintendo, Super Famicom versions do not have the benefit of the CD space for music and for voice acting. So realistically, the PC Engine is the way to go for the better music and to have real voice in the game. And also in the PC Engine version, you could switch between different characters, but on the Super Nintendo version, you can't. You only can use the main character, Reina.
And that's another one of these Japanese translation problems. Is it Lena? Is it Reina? Who knows? But Super Nintendo Valis 4 actually looks and plays quite a lot better than the PC Engine version. But the PC Engine version has the multiple characters, so it's actually a little bit more interesting to play.
It is a very blah, boring type of game. In fact, there's entire sequences where you're running just through the level and you can just avoid all the enemies, and it's just so boring. And it has some really frustrating boss battles. There's this mermaid that I was fighting, and I know if you use the right weapon, you can destroy the mermaid really fast, but I didn't have that weapon at that point. And the mermaid is just swimming back and forth, and I'm waiting for her to come back out so I can shoot her with my sword attack, and it's just not happening. So, yeah, this game is exactly like the rest of the Valis series. You have a jump, you have your sword attack, you get different power-ups, but there's different power-ups at the top, and you can select through different ones, whichever ones you want to use, that have different abilities that shoot in different types of ways.
Which is completely cumbersome and unmanageable when you're in the real time of a fight. You're sort of driving around this sub-menu in real time, trying to pick which one you're going to use while you're slashing at stuff and getting hit. It's crazy.
Yeah, 4 was a big disappointment, especially coming after 3. 3 had such a cool story, had really awesome characters, and then we went into this one. The PC Engine version did have the multiple characters, as I say, but this was so bland and boring, and you didn't get to play as Yuko, you played as Reina. And it was just like, oh, we don't even have the same main character that was in the rest of the series. It's a bit of a handoff, and it just felt like a very cheap handoff game.
Right, and when Reina plays exactly the same as Yuko, why did they bother getting rid of her?
It doesn't make
it's
any
not like
sense.
they took the series in a different direction. It's the exact same game.
It was really lazy. I think they hit a high note with the third one, and then it's just
definitely.
like, boom, we just kind of go down. Number 3 is the high note of the series. And number 4 was just kind of like, okay, we're just doing the same thing we've already done before. So those are the main games in the series. That's a lot to kind of get through today. Where is Valis now, Andrew? Where is the mighty heroine Yuko now? Where's she at?
Well, there have been a few mobile ports, and there was a Japanese PC-only release called Valis X, which took it in the direction of hentai in
Sure.
visual novel format. Tentacles and all.
It's so sad, and I think anybody who's a fan of Valis knows the end of Valis and how it ends. It ends with tentacles and crazy sex. This great action platforming series with such a legacy in Japan and a small legacy out here ends in the hentai world, and that's the sad end of this series, unfortunately.
And what I take away from Valis is it's a remarkable example of a long-running series in Japan that we got basically all the canonical games in the West. There are countless series that went on in Japan that we didn't get any sight of in the West. But Valis is a great exception. And the games aren't all great. In fact, some of them are downright poor.
Yes.
But we got them all, and that was remarkable for the time.
And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to come and talk about this series today, is because it's a long forgotten series. We will never see this series resurrected again unless something crazy happens in the world, which I highly doubt.
I don't think we'd want to play it if we did.
I don't know, like a Valis in 3D, that would be ridiculous. But we just wanted to come and talk about this series so it truly does not become forgotten and doesn't only be remembered as a hentai game in Japan, because it was a lot more than that in the 80s and 90s.
It deserves a better legacy than that.
It absolutely does, and we're happy that we could share it with you guys today. It took us a long time to get through all these games, but we had a lot of fun doing it. So, anyways, guys, until next time.